Well, hi, this is Michaela with Kentucky Spin, and today we are doing our Spotlight on Kentucky segment where we highlight different agencies around the state working hard to work with our families of individuals with disabilities. And today I have Sarah Ruth, the Executive Director of Kentucky Hands and Voices, with us to share a little bit about the great work that they're doing. So
Hi,
hi,
thank you for
Sarah.
having me.
Do you mind to talk just a little bit about Kentucky Hands and Voices and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. So, yes, my name is Sarah Roof, and I live in Richmond, Kentucky. And I have my husband Steve is a teacher at the high school, and then I have three kiddos. Hannah is 11, JD is 9, and Isaac is 8. And our faithful sidekick Slugger, our dog. We, like I said, live in Richmond and love to just do all things outdoors and play games and things like that. Love sports. I've been with Kentucky Hands and Voices, I guess, for about 4 years now. Started on the board of directors, been involved with them. And Kentucky Hands and Voices, for those who don't know, has actually been in Kentucky for 12 years as a nonprofit organization to support families of children who are deaf and hard of hearing. So that is at the heart of what we do. And so we collaborate with professionals and, of course, support parents along the journey. And though we've been in Kentucky for 12 years, we're actually part of an international organization. Hands and Voices is international, based and founded in Boulder, Colorado, by a group of moms just sitting around a table who wanted to bring the best resources and support to their children possible, and really to do so without, I guess, without bias is the best way to put it. That's one thing very interesting about Hands and Voices. Our motto is what works for your child is what makes the choice right. So no matter what communication modality a family might choose, whether it's American Sign Language, spoken language, cute speech, anything like that, we just want to make sure that they have the best resources available to them so their child can reach his or her highest potential.
Thank you, Sarah. I love Kentucky Hands and Voices and what you guys are doing to serve our families. And I love that, like you said, it's non-biased.
Yeah.
And really, regardless of whatever choice they make, you guys will help support them along that journey. And it's very parent-based and parent-friendly, which I love as well. So do you care to share your why and how you got into working with the deaf and hard of hearing and what keeps you here?
Sure. So, I mentioned my family, and so needless to say, one of those kiddos is deaf. My youngest child, Isaac, he is my why. He is the reason why I'm sitting here now. And so when he was born, he did not pass his newborn hearing screening, which was a whole new world for us. It was very surprising. We had no history of hearing loss in our family. Didn't really know anybody who was deaf, and so it kind of started us on this journey of really figuring out what worked best for Isaac, what he needed. And so a lot of research just in general about learning about deaf and hard of hearing things, what he needed in terms of healthcare, hearing healthcare, education, all of that. And so that's where we started. So he just turned 8. So right at 8 years ago is where we started on this journey. And it wasn't long into it. I mean, I'll be honest, at the beginning, it was all very selfish, I guess I should say. Like I was looking for resources for Isaac. And then somewhere along the way, I remember I went to a conference in St. Louis for parents of children who were deaf. And it was the first time I was in a room of other parents who got it, who understood kind of the feelings I had, the emotions, just the struggles, the challenges. And so that I think really put me on a path of just passion of supporting families and being with other families and finding out what they need and sharing stories. So that not long after that is when I got involved with Hands and Voices and just loved that they were unbiased in their approach. I will say that's one thing about deaf and hard of hearing culture. It can be sometimes divisive based on what modality you choose for your child. And I love that about Hands and Voices is that it really brings everything together. It doesn't matter what you choose. It's just what resources do you need. And so I got really passionate about connecting with other parents really for two reasons. One of it was because, like I mentioned, you just connected in a way when you talk to other parents because they get it, you know, even if you'd never met them. But also I realized how important it was for Isaac to, as he got older, to be around other kids like him. You know, I remember early on when we would have an event or something and he would say, that kid is like me. And I think that like me, especially for our kids with disabilities or differences, is a really important factor because it gives them something to connect to. And even as parents, it's nice to have other parents like me who you can talk to and just share things with as you go on this journey.
Absolutely. And what a great reason to get involved with that, right?
Yes, yes,
I think so many of us start out, you don't know until you know.
right.
I love that you are trying to help your son and have ended up helping so many other families along the way.
Well, and I
So
will
what are
say, you know, sometimes I say, obviously it started about Isaac, but Isaac and even our family was very fortunate just based on the region in Kentucky that we're in. Like I said, we're in Richmond. So we had easy access to resources in Lexington, Louisville. I mean, even in Richmond, you know, where there's EKU and deaf and hard of hearing services through their university right in our backyard. And so I realized as I went through that not every child in Kentucky has those resources available to them. And I thought, you know, it's not really fair based on where a child is born that they might have better access to something than other kids. So it just became about too, like, how can we improve those services and resources for kids from Eastern Kentucky to far Western Kentucky to Central Kentucky, just doing the best that we can.
That's great. I love that. And it's definitely something that is so needed. Um, what are some of the programs and services that Kentucky Hands and Voices have to offer?
One of the things I'm most excited about that people probably aren't aware of, we have a program called Guide by Your Side. And it is what it sounds like. Okay, so we have trained parent guides who are parents of children who are deaf or hard of hearing. And this is a program through Hands and Voices headquarters. So we had to apply for it. We had to go through training, but they're parents just like me. And what they do is they come alongside another parent on their journey based on where that might be. You know, I call it a journey because it truly is a journey, because you have some of those early feelings at diagnosis where you might be overwhelmed or scared or just trying to figure out what's going on. But then it goes on because then you're in hopefully in early intervention and you're trying to figure out that part, and then you transition to school and you try to figure out that part. So there's so many different points along the way where parents might have questions or need support. And so that's what our parent guides are for. Right now we have 9 parent guides, again, throughout the state, because we want to make sure that they're in all areas where they can connect with families. Our goal really is to connect them to a parent guide closest to them, just in case they want to meet up for coffee or a play date in the park or something like that. But also sometimes it might be based on the child's needs. So, you know, we have one parent guide who fostered and adopted, and so sometimes if that's the case, we might pair her. So it might be based on more or the type of hearing loss. You know, we have one who has a child with unilateral hearing loss, so we try to pair that based on what the needs are, but also looking at the geographics areas as well. So that's kind of our most exciting program, is just where we can provide that really one-on-one parent support. But also as part of that program, we do a lot of outreach activities. Now, 2020 has looked a little bit different because we haven't been able to do our typical outreach, but in the past, we do try to provide a lot of outreach support. One of our favorites is we do Deaf Awareness Day at the Louisville Zoo, usually Labor Day weekend in September. And so based on sponsorship, we can, you know, pay for the family or the child at a minimum to come and just enjoy the day at the zoo. We have t-shirts that everybody can wear. And so, you know, even if you might not know anybody, it's easy to identify, hey, there's another family. And again, it's really good for the kiddos because they see how many other kids there are like them, and it provides them the opportunity to connect. Now this year we did, like I said, it's been a little bit different, but we did a, we called it Camp Little Victories. And so we did a camp in the box experience over the summer, where we sent boxes of activities to, we had 55 campers all throughout the state. And then we had a Facebook group where we were able to interact and ask questions, but they had like arts and crafts in their box and a camp t-shirt that they could tie dye. So and like a bingo card. So you would do typical camp activities, make s'mores or go camping or hiking, biking, whatever the case was, but provided some family fun activities while also giving that Facebook event time for people to connect, and we gave away prizes. And so that probably ended up being one of my favorite events that we've done, which surprised me, but it just really still allowed parents the opportunity to interact and connect with each other.
That is so cool. I didn't even know that you guys had done that. That is really neat. One of my favorite thing about Kentucky Hands and Voices is that you guys just really go above and beyond to try and meet the needs of the families that you serve. And especially during COVID, I was very impressed with your back to school resources on your website. Do you care to talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like it can help support parents looking to, navigate this new virtual world of school, but also teachers as well.
Yes, so our back to school resources, let me tell you, it was a labor of love. Because everybody who is involved with us, they're parents, and so this year has just been a very challenging year, navigating, especially for those that have had children in school, but even more so for our kids who are deaf and hard of hearing, because the masking requirements, the social distancing requirements, those are things that really have created hurdles for our kiddos, because a lot of them rely on visual cues or the need for proximity to understand what others are saying and to be involved and be engaged in social interaction. And so we worked on this, what we called a COVID back to school document, where we just really tried to outline the different types of facial coverings that were out there, again, with the premise that what works for your child is what makes the choice right, because it might be different for different kids based on how much that they, use visual cues and whatnot. So that's kind of where that came from. It was just our parents grabbing some resources. We also wanted to look at, accommodations in the classroom to consider, because again, everything looks different with distancing, and of course virtual. What are things you need to ask for on a virtual schooling, which is what so many are doing right now. So things that sometimes you might not normally consider that you need to consider. And of course we did. We worked in conjunction with a lot of professionals. That's the other thing that we do. Half of our board, actually the majority of our board, are parents, but we also have a lot of professionals. And so without them, I mean, even as a parent on a personal level, you have to really lean into those professionals in your life, and Hands and Voices is the same way. We surround ourselves and get input from professionals whenever we can, whether it's audiologists, speech therapists, interpreters, deaf adults. That's another program I'll come back and talk about too here in a second when we have a break, because I think it's something else that makes us unique, a very fun program we have involving deaf adults.
Absolutely. And I love that on your website you have everything broke down for parents or even for teachers looking for accessibility or how to provide accommodations based on whether you're doing in person, whether you're doing virtual, and even homeschool. So I think that's a terrific place to go and look for resources, because I know all parents are struggling right now, but especially parents of children with disabilities. And even the teachers just struggling and trying to figure out how to navigate, how do you accommodate them virtually? How do you adapt to that? And so I really feel like that was a great resource. And do you care to talk a little bit about what you're doing with adults as well? Because that's very, very interesting.
So yeah, we have, one thing, a lot of our parents, so over 90% of parents with a child who is deaf or hard of hearing are hearing parents. And so needless to say, with that statistic, a lot of them really have no background in deafness or deaf culture or anything like that. And so we wanted to provide an opportunity for families and children to be able to interact with deaf adults, because deaf adults have so much from their experience. I mean, our kids are going to be deaf adults in, in years to come. And
Yes.
so we wanted to learn from their experiences and have them also serve as role models. And so I think it was about a year and a half ago, we came up with a program called DHH Heroes. So DHH meaning deaf, hard of hearing. And we recruited some deaf adults and of varying ages and varying communication modalities, and they serve as our DHH heroes. We launched this effort. We do a superhero 5K typically every year. And so we launched that as part of our superhero 5K. The DHH heroes had their own shirt, and then we had trading cards made. So each DHH hero had a trading card, and so they came up with like their own superhero name that was on the front, and on the back of the card, it just talked about who they were as a person. What are their hobbies? What are their interests? What do they do for a living? And then they were able to put like an encouraging quote or an inspiring quote, and our kiddos loved it. Everybody loves trading cards, whether there's baseball cards or Pokemon cards or whatever. And so it gave them a chance, like, hey, these are people like me, like, and here's some things that they do. What if I'm interested in this? Like, it gives me something to look forward to, or ideas. And so really served as role models. It also we found out some deaf and hard of hearing teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing in the schools were using them as part of their curriculum because they were very positive based. And so it gave them tools that they could use with their students, just again to be proud of who they are, and to know that there weren't limits on what they could do, and give them ideas of what different deaf adults in Kentucky. That's the other thing, because we want them, there might be opportunities when they come to one of our events to interact with some of these DHH heroes. And so they were all, like I said, throughout Kentucky, and they would come to some of our events and interact. Like, we also did some home run for hearing loss baseball games, like with the Louisville Bats and the Florence Freedom, Lexington Legends, Bowling Green Hot Rods. So again, we did it all throughout the state. And so they would come and sign the trading cards and do trading cards and things like that. So just gives another opportunity for parents to interact with the deaf adults and to learn from them, and know that they're just typical people, and give somebody for their kiddos to look up to.
What a great idea. I love how creative and out of the box you guys get when it comes to serving your families. It's really, really inspiring.
Well, thank you. We have a very creative team. Like I said, our parent guides work hard. Our board of directors come up with great ideas, just again, to reach people as best we can.
That's awesome. What are some typical questions that you get from parents?
Sure. Typically, the number one question that we get is, where do I learn American Sign Language? So that's the most common one that we get. And because there are few resources for that, and it's just something that parents want to know, even if they've chosen spoken language for their child, it's something that they're interested in. It might be something that they're able to supplement with. And so that's typically the most frequent question we get asked. And so, we do lean into resources like Kentucky Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Sign Language Network of Kentucky, or other agencies that do sign language classes, Kentucky School for the Deaf when possible, and then online resources as well. So we provide those resources for families. The other ones that we get is, how do I keep my kids' devices on, whether it's hearing aids or cochlear implants or whatever. And so especially when they're young or new to the journey, that is a struggle of just, trying to get these little ones to keep devices on their heads. So that's a frequent question that we get. And then just looking for resources and support, a variety of resources and support along the way. And usually if we don't know an answer, we will, like I said, we really do collaborate with a lot of agencies. And so if we don't have an answer, then we'll look for it through one of our other partners that we work with.
That's great. What is something that you feel is critical for families that they need to know about Kentucky Hands and Voices, especially right now?
Well, I think, the thing, like I said, is we are parents just like them. And so, on different stages of the journey. And so we're just wanting to come alongside families and support them in whatever way we can. So like I mentioned, our Guide by Your Side program, it's free. There's no cost for families. We receive a grant, and which allows us to be able to do that. And, I think the biggest thing is just knowing that we're here. A lot of people don't know that we're here. And like I said, our Guide by Your Side program, we've been doing that for a little more than 2 years now. But just that's a resource and available to help families at any stage, and we'll get them tapped in. And then, like I said, the DHH Hero program, I think that's a big one too, because we have so much to learn from our deaf adults and their experiences, and how we can improve the systems that serve our kids, whether it's the educational system or the medical system, whatever it is, the systems that serve our kids, how we can improve on that by learning from them.
That's great information to know. And so what do you hope that your families will take away from this interview? And what is the message that you would like to convey about Kentucky Hands and Voices?
Goodness, I think the thing to take away is just that your child is a gift, and there's so much to learn from that child. But with that is to be able to lean into other parents who are on this journey with you, some that might be farther along, or some that might be new to it, and how you can support them in that. We always say, we actually have a group called Our Village, that it's parents only, on ways that we can support each other, because I think there's something unique about parent-to-parent connection and parent-to-parent support. So I would say find your village and lean into them for some answers, and don't ever hesitate, because when it's your child, we all know everybody wants what's best for their child. And I think especially when it comes to having a child with a special need, you just question things a lot, or so you can get overwhelmed very easily. But just finding those people and not being afraid to ask questions, and say when you need help. And Hands and Voices is here to support you. And that's the other unique thing, is even though we're a statewide chapter, we do have there's 43 other chapters. And so if there's other resources that we need to go outside of our state to find, then we have that network available to us as well. Sometimes I know other states are looking for those who speak a different language or something like that. So we have that network that we can lean into as well to support families, because even through headquarters, they have specialty groups like, children who are deaf and hard of hearing that are military families, or who have additional needs, or unilateral loss. I mean, there's all kinds of other specialty programs where you might want to get connected to something a little bit more specific to serve your needs. And so we can probably get people connected in that way too.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for speaking with us today on Spotlight in Kentucky. And I'm so excited to share Hands and Voices with the families that Kentucky Spin serves as well. I feel like it's a critical resource and something that really is unmatched as far as agencies around the state goes. And so I really appreciate you sharing with us. I know I've learned a lot today, and I hope that our families have as well.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all that you all do. Advocacy is a big part of what Kentucky Hands and Voices does. And that is what Kentucky Spin is all about, is, just getting parents the resources that they need so that they can advocate on behalf of their child. And then with the ultimate goal, of course, is hopefully that the child can eventually advocate for himself or herself. So we're definitely partners in this together, and just connecting parents and getting them educated. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I do feel like our agencies almost kind of mirror each other a little bit. And I think that's really, really neat as well. But thanks again for joining us, Sarah, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Michaela.
Thanks. Bye.